You're listening to episode 671 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is entitled The End Times, given on the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2018. There's a story I once read. It goes like this. There once was a nun who had been dying for years. The other nuns kept her comforted by feeding her milk laced with brandy several times a day. On the night of her death, the sisters gathered around the bedside to hear her final words. Just before slipping away, she rallied long enough to take a final sip of milk, smile, and say, "Whatever you do, sisters, never get rid of that cow." Now, I offer this humorous story to make a point that death is a certainty for all, and that we need to let our faith inform the rest of ourselves as to the bigger picture. Clearly, this nun had a sense of humor, a sense of faith about the reality of eternity after this life. She did then not cling to this life. She lived her life in expectation of Christ's second coming. Today we heard some fantastic images connected with Christ's second coming. The scriptures use an ancient form of writing called apocalyptic, in which dramatic and symbolic language is used to give hope. Now, it may not sound all that hopeful when we hear of, quote, unsurpassed distress and everlasting horror and disgrace and tribulation. But you see, these things were already happening to the people or would soon come upon them. Within the context of such calamities, the prophet Daniel wrote about those who would shine brightly and would be like stars forever. Jesus spoke similarly about times of distress before he would come again in glory. But instead of trying to predict when it will come, we need to focus on the glory of salvation and prepare ourselves to be those who have persevered in communion with our Lord, knowing the signs of the times. We need to know those signs. To be clear, we have already entered into the end times. It was ushered in with Christ's first coming. And we've had tribulation ever since, especially towards the church. A glance at history does not require much research to reveal that there's been many times people have been killed for the faith. So we do not need to look into the distant future, and do not listen to anyone who says they know when the end will be. Or if they do, then you might want to make a deal with trading their house over to you in whatever date that they think it will be. You likely will win. No one knows, not even Jesus. And if you lose, doesn't matter, does it? So again, it has been with us, this end times, since Christ came as a babe in the manger. Another way history reveals this fact is simply by reviewing the chaos and number of martyrs that have been made since Christ's coming. The amount of tribulation, distress, violence, and death in the last century has outdone all previous centuries. We have had more martyrs for the faith in this last century compared to any century previous. So we don't need to wonder when the end times will be. Nor as the faithful should we be paranoid or paralyzed with fear about it. Remember, God is with us. Our Lord will never abandon us. What we need to be are good stewards, faithful sheep of his flock, active hands and feet of Christ to those in our world. And instead of trying to predict the end of the world, be ready now. I like to say, be audit ready. Do not put off reconciling with your brother or sister. Tell those whom you love that you love them. Show mercy to those whom you meet. Be kind to strangers. Share your time, talent, and treasure with those in need. Share the love of Christ with others. Let them know of your hope, which transcends all politics, economics, wars, and even natural disasters. The fact remains, our time will come. Death to this world cannot be avoided. But with a firm faith and a deep communion with our loving Jesus, we can share our hope-filled faith like the nun in my opening story. Can you still have a sense of humor in the midst of difficulties? Or as Psalm 16 expresses it today, we are to live knowing that He is our portion and cup. He holds us fast. He is at our right hand, and we are not disturbed. Our hearts are glad, and souls rejoice. We abide in confidence. Our Lord continually shows us the path of life, the fullness of joy in His presence. And finally, we do not dwell in any darkness which is about us, or walk about as naysayers, but rather delight in the good things of this world. The good things as foreshadowings of heaven, the place ultimately where Jesus wants us all to be.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast. A funny thing happened as I was approaching the church this morning, and I think about this as we're getting close to Thanksgiving. There was a flock of wild turkeys that had just crossed the street in front of the church and started walking over to where I was going to park. I'm thinking, hey, wait a second here. So I moved my car slowly over into my parking spot. They had kind of moved out of the way. And as I then backed up, I thought, I need to scare these critters away. So I got my dog out. My dog was in my car. I have a Bashan Poodle mix. So he's a Beudel dog. His name is Benny. And so I took Benny out and I just held him and I kind of lunged him at them, just kind of in a small little gesture of like, okay, I'm going to get you. And I went, rawr. And of course, then the turkeys took off. Never thought that a poodle was a guard from turkeys. Nonetheless, if you have any questions or any comments, you just go ahead and go to my website, fatherbill.org, FRBILL.org, and there you can find out about my social media things and Facebook, Twitter, etc., Instagram. But you can also email me right from the webpage there as well. And until next time, may God bless you and have a great week. Bye-bye.